Welcome back to Purple Rose Crafts. I'm Amanda, and today we're going to be talking about knitting a tighter or neater rib stitch. So we talked about the original kind of ribbing stitch, which is this one here in our beginner knitter tutorial part 2, which I will link up here in the corner. And if you haven't watched that, I would recommend going ahead and checking that out because it does teach you exactly how to do a simple rib stitch. So basically a knit one, purl one, ribbing, which we have done here. So what oftentimes happens though with a lot of ribbing stitches is that we'll end up with this kind of like gapping happening in our stitch. So what happens is we end up with some looseness in the middle of the stitch, and it's just honestly that's the way it turns out. So it is reversible, like it's on both sides, and of course our kind of gapping here happens regardless. So in all the rows of ribbing. So what I was looking for was a tutorial for how to actually fix this and how to kind of prevent this from happening to my ribbing in the future. And so what I came across was a tutorial from a Button and Blue, and she has created she has a blog based out of the UK where she actually taught how to create this beautiful tight ribbing stitch. So basically what is happening here is we have our gapping happening in the center of each kind of purl, and then in this one we have like a nice tight V that's happening in that section. So we're not seeing all of that spreading out of each stitch. And of course it is the same on both sides, which I love. So I have done a written tutorial for this in my blog, so you can have a look at that. If you do better with the video, stay here, and if you do better with the written instructions, watch the video and then go through the tutorial, the handwritten tutorial, or the written out tutorial with the photos. And then if you have any kind of questions after that, then leave me a comment either on the blog or here, and let me know what you need clarification on. Once you get the hang of it, it honestly is super, super simple. What we're actually going to do is we're going to pop on over to a hat that I've been working on, and we're looking at what we're doing here is actually what I've done is a 2x2 ribbing. So we've got 2 knits side by side and then 2 purls in the back, which is what we're seeing on this side. So again, reversible. I've picked another self-striping yarn. This one is like purple, like dark purple, light purple, pink, and then this pretty light blue. And that one is comes from this Loops and Threads a Joy DK yarn, which is honestly so lovely. It's so soft, and it's gonna make such a beautiful a hat, which I am working on for my daughter. So it's a little bit lighter than what we've been using lately. It's a 3 on the weight scale, and we're using a 4mm knitting needle. Now, when I start a hat pattern with a ribbing, I will often start with my needles a size lower, or a full millimeter lower in this case, just to kind of get a nice tight ribbing. And then after that, I move into a little bit larger of a stitch, a needle, I mean, because when we're ribbing, what happens is it actually stretches out a little bit, and then you end up with some like kind of gapping at the bottom, and it just kind of looks a little bit wonky. So here's an example of a hat that I finished, and because I had done cables, these kind of Celtic cables here in the middle, what happened with my ribbing is it's actually really loose, and I didn't use the one size smaller needles or 1mm smaller needles to kind of make this ribbing section. So what happens is when it lays flat, it's tighter here through the cables, and it's really loose through the bottom here. And so I recognized my mistake and moved into using the smaller needle. So what we're actually using right now is these are a 3.5mm bamboo needle. They're seem very, very tiny to me because I'm used to a little bit larger needle. But the 3.5mm is just slightly smaller than what it called for on the yarn package, or on the tag in this case. So we're using 3.5 millimeters while we finish off our ribbing. And once we move into the actual body of the hat, I'll switch to a 4.5 millimeters. So I'm using about a 0.5 millimeter on either side of the recommended size. I just want to make sure that the hat is gonna stretch well for my daughter and actually fit her her head. So I will talk about things on my blog post about how to decide how big to make a hat if you're making a custom for a specific person. And you have that person available to actually to measure their head, which obviously I do with my daughter. But if I was making it as a gift for, like, say, a nephew or niece, or really anyone that I, you know, don't have access to on a daily basis, I would, you know, use a size chart basically. And then in the case of being able to measure, of course, I will just measure my child's head and figure out my number of stitches. And it's a quick little calculation, which I will include in my blog post. So, all right, so let's talk about this this ribbing that we're going to do, and it's nice and tight. So what we're doing here is we're starting here. We're just past the start of our row. We're going to start with 2 knit stitches. So this is our first 2 here, the knit stitch. And what we're going to do is actually we're going to knit everything backwards. So when we would normally knit in like this, we're actually going to knit in into the back leg of the loop. So we're going to knit this backwards. So we're going to do a single knit. Now in the tutorial, in a Button and Blues tutorial, she recommended using a straight knit stitch, the second stitch. But I tried that and I actually found that it loosened off the second stitch for some reason. So I have taken to doing both of them backwards. Plus it also means that it's more simple, and it means I don't have to switch the stitch in the middle of like not all 4 stitches are different, only 2 different stitches, which makes it easier for me. All right, so now we're going to bring our yarn to the front and we're going to do a backwards purl. So a regular purl is like this. So a backwards purl, we're going to come around the back, we're going to catch that back leg and come through the front like this. So we're actually coming, so let's do that again, up nice and close. So we're going to, a regular purl is like this, where the backwards purl, we're going to come and catch the back leg of the stitch. So we're going to catch it there and loop our yarn around as we would normally do. Let's do that one again because that's a little bit more complicated. So the backwards purl, we're going to come from back to front the same as we would for a regular purl, but we're going to catch the back leg, not the front leg. So loop our yarn around and come off of our left hand needle. All right, so let's do the backwards knits again. So we're going to knit into the back of the leg of the stitch, 2 knits here, into the back, and let's go nice and slow on those purls again in case you missed it. So yarn to the front as we would normally for all purl stitches, and now we're going to catch that back leg coming back to front with our needle. And loop it off, and again there, and loop it off, loop it back through. Okay, so that is the essentials for our nice tight ribbing. We're just going to continue knitting and purling through the back of the loops instead of the front loops. So we're coming to the front and we're going to continue going this way. Now when I'm making a hat, I will often make my ribbing about 1.5 to 2 inches long before moving on to the body of the hat. That just kind of gives me a nice long bottom to the hat. And if you wanted to do the type of hat where you actually fold the brim underneath and then sew it, like kind of attach it in this way, then you'll want to go actually 2.5 to 3 inches long, so you get that nice 1.5 to 2 inches of ribbing on both sides of the inside and the outside. Okay.